I'm going to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, the great Llewellyn King. He is one of the wise men in energy and political journalism and beyond. He created the White House Chronicles TV show, which I think still airs on about 200 PBS stations and Sirius Radio. He, many years ago, long before there was anything of its kind, he created the Energy Daily. And Llewellyn's also a syndicated columnist, and he has received too many awards to list today, but I hope you will enjoy hearing now from this wonderful man. He'll speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll take Q&A for about 10 minutes. So Llewellyn, you're up.
I thank you very, very much, Trent, and I like the way you read what I wrote for you. It's an honor, and I hope I can discharge it in some way to be with you today and at this extraordinary summit, which is, of course, also reflective of how extraordinary Clint Vince is and how extraordinary his role in electricity and energy in general has been. And what he does in bringing people together, which he mentioned this morning, and creating a climate of ideas, because you must have the ideas first. You cannot begin with the action, or you can, but you don't get very far. I'm here, I think, to explain to you my vision of the essentiality of electricity, not the essentiality of gas or coal or oil or nuclear, but of electricity. Electricity is unique. It is the one thing that is unlikely to be usurped. We're not going to invent something beyond electricity because it's part of nature, it's elemental. And society, all societies moving forward, civilization as we know it, moving forward, is totally dependent on electricity, and increasingly so. It was dependent 10 years ago, it will be more dependent 10 years hence. But we're also in a very critical moment when the future is both tremendously exciting, unbelievably full of opportunity, and by almost the same measure, very worrisome, because it is so uncharted, and at this point appears to be so unchartable. And that is true of electricity as well. And I single out electricity so that we don't get confused by the route to a goal, but keep our eye on the goal. I've been saying this about journalism recently. There's a lot of preoccupation with what is going to happen to local journalism. Who's going to cover the courts? Who's going to cover the state houses, the local councils? If there's no coverage, there's room for all kinds of malarkey. The answer is probably not a revival of the newspaper, which is so dear to my heart, as I've spent nearly 70 years working in newspapers, but the new world of the new technology and new players. And I mention new players because there's a tendency to think that there's a natural progression and companies or other institutions move into the new from the old seamlessly. In reality, the new begets the new. The new does not necessarily support the old. Sometimes it does. But the example I think of is aviation. You would think logically that airplanes would be made by the automobile manufacturers. As aviation came of age, the automobile manufacturers had everything you could dream of. They had engines, they had metal, they had engineers, they had resources, they had money, they had marketing. They didn't have ideas. they had instead a thought that this is actually no more than an automobile or a truck that flies. They did make a few airplanes, Ford Tri-Pacer, General Motors made some in the Second World War, but it took new names, Sikorsky, Boeing, McDonnell, Douglas, in order to build an aviation industry. And I just mention that when we sit today looking at the great new frontier of artificial intelligence, and we see the big tech companies lined up to take charge of it, it's not necessarily going to happen that way. This is an expectation that there is a logical progression, like a graph going up on graph paper. I think that we've only seen so little of the beginning of the age of AI that we're not sure who will dominate it, what kind of AI, or the nature of AI itself, how much of it will be modified and created by itself to set in motion here something that we've never seen before. And we have to play it very carefully. Electricity, of course, is essential to the progress of artificial intelligence. Whether it will continue on the current trajectory with the need for an enormous number of data centers, well, it won't. There'll be changes. Data centers will become more efficient. We may see, for example, a photon chip, a light chip, that uses no electricity whatsoever, and changing the whole nature of a data center, at least reducing the heat and the need to cool the data center. These are things in prospect. We're also seeing the emergence not only of AI agents, which are all the talk at the moment, but also the emergence of the uses of AI which are not necessarily large language model. Small language models are getting very specific uses. They don't require as much of the cloud. They don't require the same data center input. I'm not an expert on this at all, but these are the things that are on the horizon. We cannot but guess at what will happen when general AI arrives. The scope of that is beyond imagination. It may be devastatingly huge, and it may fit in quite gently. The one thing we do know is there will be an adjustment in employment. My own thought is forget what's happened. Do not get confused with what happened with automation. Automation created jobs because it created products, because it was an additive thing in the manufacturing process. AI, to this point in time, would appear to be subtractive. But don't worry, electricity is still going to be hugely central, and electricity is going to increase in its usefulness to society almost exponentially as we go forward. By the end of this decade, at least half the intracity transportation, the delivery systems which have blossomed since COVID, will be electric. School buses will be electric. And around the world, there will be electric vehicles. It is already an unstoppable move. We can delay it in the US, and we might, but it is an unstoppable movement. During the energy crisis, I seem to be the last ember of several things: the British Empire, the energy crisis, and the newspaper as we knew it. From my last ember position in society, I would like to point out that we used to, in the 1970s and 80s, at places like Aspen, talk about the future, and of course we got it dead wrong. One Aspen meeting, we concluded that the American economy will decline 23%. Did not. But what we used to talk about was, what will happen when all the Chinese get an automobile? There'll be no oil left on Earth. There'll be no energy left because the Chinese will be burning it in their automobile. Well, all the Chinese are getting an automobile. and it's not creating a ripple in demand for oil because they're getting electric cars, and China is way ahead in the deployment and manufacture and design and the scheme of electric cars of the rest of the world. They've chosen, and I think it's fairly significant, not to have recharging so much as battery replacement. And you drive your automobile into a station, goes over something, your battery slides out, a new battery slides in, you drive off. About the same amount of time consumed as it would take you to pump gas from a gas pump, unless you've got a very large car and you have to take longer. I have a small car and I do it in 3 minutes. If I prosper, I will have to take 5 minutes. The future is redolent with demands on electricity. I think the critical thing is always to keep the eye on the product, not on the components of the product. Today in the United States, we're going through a discussion of the components of the product. The product, the essential, the absolutely indispensable, eternal product is electricity. We're talking about the components, the fuel, whether it's nuclear generated or from coal or from gas or from fracked hydro or from solar or, dare we mention, wind. It is the wrong way to look at it. Look at the product, look at electricity. In newspapering, I say to my colleague, look at journalism. Don't look at a piece of paper or a television set. Look at the product, which is journalism. In the energy field, we must look at the product, which is indispensable and greatly in demand, electricity, and a demand which is going to rise very rapidly, not necessarily exponentially, but very rapidly. And we need to think of that product and where we're going to, how much electricity we're going to get. Then we need to look at how we're going to get it. In 1974, I worked on a study for President Nixon on the future of energy, and it was bleak. It was really bad. We had coal and coal and coal and maybe nuclear, but there were already the beginnings of environmental opposition to nuclear, and our conclusions were electrify everything, convert coal into gas, into oil, into liquids anyway, use it directly in utility boilers, and hope for the best. It was believed that natural gas was a depleted resource. Jack O'Leary, the first Deputy Secretary of Energy, told my reporter when he asked a question about natural gas, he said, "Don't ask about natural gas. It's a depleted resource. It's over. Do you get that? It's over." So you've got to be very careful with these predictions for the future because you've got to appreciate technological evolution. And in electricity, it will continue. And we don't know what that evolution. Natural gas is a product of the coming together, the collaboration of technologies. It was partly deregulation. It was certainly a 3D seismic, horizontal drilling, a better drill bit, and the aeroderivative turbine, the jet engine on the ground. Up to that point, around about 1990, we had so-called heavy frame turbines, which were less efficient, less adaptable, and couldn't do the job. All of these technologies coming together created today's enormously enviable natural gas situation. Usually there has to be an amalgam of technologies coming together simultaneously to produce a large change. You might have said that Stevenson, with his condenser, made the steam engine. true, but an awful lot of other work was going on, which included everything from better safety valves to better steel, etc., which took the steam engine invented to pump water out of coal mines, the Newcomen engine, which was limited. Stephenson added the condenser and basically made the Industrial Revolution possible. But there is always a confluence of technologies, or normally a confluence of technologies coming together. The one extraordinary thing about electricity is it stands out there a head and shoulders above everything else, as it's unlikely to be supplanted. And you cannot say anything is absolute, but it is unlikely within hundreds of years to be in any way supplanted. What will happen is we will improve the means of manufacturing it. And again, this business of it takes a number of technologies. The renewables, the so-called intermittents, are getting to be more useful because of a different technology. Batteries are making it feasible to use renewables and intermittent technologies. And there are others which we'll still hear from. Excuse me. For example, the wave power, the energy in the ocean is enormous, but our technology for capturing it is primitive. We have things that float, things that bounce, and we haven't overcome the incredible corrosive nature of salt yet. Anything you put in it. Just think about it. Navies of the world have spent probably trillions of dollars trying to deal with corrosion from salt. And I've got the answer pretty well. Paint. So I leave you with this happy thought, and that is that electricity is the critical path to the future and to human well-being. And I want to say a personal word, and that is that I think those of you engaged in some measure in the production and delivery of electricity are extraordinarily fortunate because you do something that is good for humanity. You can go home at the end of the day with this feeling that somehow you've done something good for humanity. When I started the Energy Daily, a few years later, I started Defense, which was a very interesting publication. But when you looked at a reactor, or you looked at a turbine, or you looked at anything in energy, you could enjoy it because it was good for people. You look at, well, I remember going to the Paris Air Show and looking at the B-1 bomber, which is a particularly malevolent appearance, and thinking that is a great machine for killing people. You don't say that when you look. And that changes the attitude. And it's interesting, of those two publications, reporters who worked for Defense Week have done hugely well. Not one of them writes about defense. Reporters who worked for the Energy Daily have done very well indeed, and most of them stayed in some way related to energy because it's more attractive, it's more enjoyable, it's so infinitely worthwhile. And I think you should be affected as a provider of electricity, whether you're on the legal side, whether you're on the financial side, whether you're on the technology side, whether you're building a better fuel, a better connector, etc. And I just wanted to mention parenthetically that it's not always big developments that save the day. The improvement in the nature of connectors as we move gradually from steel cord connectors to carbon fiber cord will increase the flow, decrease the chances of wildfires and failures. So we've got this tremendous phalanx of things improving, all for the purposes of electricity. Do not fix on one, fix on electricity. It is without peer, it is superb, it is wonderful, and we're lucky enough to live in a time of it. And its final saving grace and its use to humanity may be, as summers get hotter around the globe, especially towards the equator. We need more electricity because we're going to have to cool an awful lot of people.